Let's think about what happens when we sleep. Early in the day, the middle of the day, or later in the day. So let's deal with this first question of when is the ideal feeding window?
The two most common questions about intermittent fasting are: when is the ideal time for the eating window?
Is it early in the day, the middle of the day, or later in the day?
And how long should that eating window be? Should it be 8 hours? We already heard why the 8-hour window was first established. It was because of these lab conditions and the conditions of the particular relationship of the graduate student involved. Or should it be 7 hours or 6 hours or 12 hours? It turns out that there's some general frameworks that we can follow in order to answer these questions. As we move into this portion of the discussion, I want to highlight a very important reference that just literally came out last week in the journal Endocrinology Reviews. And the title of this review is Time-Restricted Eating for the Prevention and Management of Metabolic Diseases. Although the data in this paper go well beyond metabolic diseases, this is a paper from Sachin Panda's lab. It's a very lengthy review with an enormous table that's beautifully organized that scripts out all the studies done in humans. Well over 100 studies looking at time, restricted feeding in athletes, men, women, children, diabetes, no diabetes, etc., with detailed references and description of the outcomes. I've spent a lot of time with this review, even though it just came out recently and is an absolute goldmine resource. It is also the major resource for everything I'm about to tell you if you would like to delve deeper into the material.
So let's deal with this first question of when is the ideal feeding window? And here again, we're thinking about a schedule of eating that involves eating at least once every 24 hours, not 2-day or 3-day or every other day fasts.
So it turns out that the answer to the question, when is it best to eat, is actually best answered by thinking about the other side of the coin, which is when is it best to fast. So, because we are fasting during sleep, it's very clear that it's best to extend the sleep-related fast either into the morning or to start it in the evening. Now this might seem kind of obvious, but it's actually not so obvious. You could place that feeding window early in the day, middle of the day, or late in the day.
Let's think about what happens when we sleep.
When we sleep, our body undergoes a number of different processes in the brain and body in order to recover the cells and tissues. Many of you have probably heard of autophagic, which is essentially a cleaning up, a gobbling up of dead cells and cells that are injured or sick. And this is a natural process that occurs, and it occurs mainly during sleep. Although not only during sleep, fasting of any kind does tend to enhance autophagy. It is not the only way to create autophagic conditions. Autophagic conditions can be created simply by following a subcaloric diet, and there are other things that one can do in order to trigger autophagy. But fasting does trigger autophagy. So when we're asleep, the bad cells are getting gobbled up and eaten, and the good cells also are undergoing certain repair mechanisms mainly related to, or at least governed by, those circadian genes that we talked about earlier, those clock genes. So you're already fasting when you're asleep, and how deep you are into that fast depends on how long it was since your last meal. So if you fast early in the day, and you've been asleep for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, I would hope somewhere between 6 and 8 hours for most people is going to be beneficial. When you wake up, I mentioned earlier that you don't want to eat for at least the first 60 minutes after waking, but were you to extend that fasting to say 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., or even 12 noon or later, you are taking advantage of the deep fast that you are in during sleep, and certainly toward the end of sleep.